All right, all right. It's two after, so I'll just go ahead and get started. So I hope you like that new way of doing things or this new idea that we had recently. So I think Simon, you were asking if that was AI driven. It is not actually. This is a I don't know how it works exactly, but there's an application that I'm using called H2R Graphics, and it brings in the ability to do like overlays, right? So that's how I did like the countdown timer. You could do lower thirds with like a name on it, stuff like that. But what we're doing here is they added new functionality called the map. And what it does is it connects to the YouTube comments. Unfortunately, it doesn't do LinkedIn. I'll have to, submit a request for that or something. But when those come in, I'm able to click the comments and then it does a lookup based off the text. And if it can find like coordinates for it, it will drop it on the map. So I was able to get like a few of them working, but that worked out pretty cool. I was able to get like the Netherlands, Detroit, UK. Phil, it didn't work for Switzerland, maybe because you added other stuff, but it's just kind of something to play with today. Andy, how's it going, dude?
Doing well, man. How are you doing?
Good.
I was
We're a
geeking
little
out.
bit slow start again, yeah, because we're kind of geeking out a little bit. But I just want to show this because it was really fun to play with. This is that map. So I've got like the social thing behind the map itself, and the map is just a full screen terrain, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm connected to the YouTube chat, so I'm able to click to highlight that, and when I click it, it does a lookup and drops a pin. So pretty cool stuff. I really like that feature. I think that's pretty fun. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about personal knowledge management, or PKM, or second brain, or whatever you call it. And I think this is going to be a really interesting topic today because, it's a lot about like personal productivity, right? And talking about, how you collect information, how you organize it. It's a very personalized thing. And we might cause some ruffles during this one. We'll see. But, I'm excited to chat about it anyway because, like, I've kind of gone outside of the Microsoft stack. But yeah, so hopefully you guys are here to chat about that. And I really want to hear a lot in the chat about what you guys think about this personal knowledge management idea and how you kind of keep everything together in your second brain so that you don't overwhelm, your biological brain. But before we start on that, I wanted to talk a little bit of housekeeping. Is we've got we're thinking about trying out a new structure, and I want to know in the chat or leave a comment later on if you're watching later, like what you think about this structure. I feel like we kind of, maybe start and kind of, it's a little bit, I don't know, like unstructured in the way that we move forward into the topic we're talking about. So we're thinking about like doing that map idea, starting a little bit earlier, kind of having the chat go back and forth with a cool map, and then do a quick like, what are we up to right now? Like, Andy, what are you playing around with? What's been fun for you the last month? Me do the same thing, and then really dive right into the topic. And we want to kind of split the topic into four main parts, right? So, what are we talking about? Kind of define like if it's a Teams feature or something like that. What do we know about this and kind of introduce it a little bit? Then get into like poking around. Can we break it? Let's deep dive and actually like poke the tires on it. And then wrap it up with like a concise, what did we learn? What's our kind of wish list about the topic? And what are our recommendations? What can you go take in your environment? Or if you're an administrator, what can you go take to your leadership? What should we be thinking about when we look at this like emerging technology? And then do something fun and just kind of end out with like a tip or an app that we learned about in the past month, just to kind of grow our overall knowledge base and network about things that help us, every day. So let me know what you think about that structure. Andy, this was kind of your brainchild. Is like we need a little bit more, you know, something that we could like make chapters to, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
just
think that'll be good.
I think about like the shows that I watch on YouTube, and I think about
Mm-hmm.
like, the media that I consume, and I'm like, there's kind of a theme, and there's some consistency to it, and so I wanted to kind of play around a little bit with like just structuring a little
Mm-hmm.
on how we present some of the content, and
Yeah.
that allows us to kind of focus on some of the creative stuff outside of like the uh, X's and O's, and like kind of moving through the how tos in the process. And so it gives us the ability to kind of flex a new muscle a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
because we know what we're going to be contributing each and every month.
Yeah. Cool. So let's uh let's dive right in then with like what have we been playing with and what's exciting. For me, over the past week, I've gotten a little bit obsessed with two things lately. The first is Tears of the Kingdom, the new Zelda game on Switch. I went out on midnight on Thursday. I went out at midnight and bought the game at GameStop. And then my friend Morris, he texted me at Nebraska Furniture Mart in Kansas City. He found the collector's edition. So I've now got two copies of the game plus the custom controller, and I've been playing, just pouring hours every night into Tears of the Kingdom. I've been unlocking all the map and just going around taking my time and exploring, and that's been a lot of fun. And then the second thing for me is um, I let my MVP environment expire on accident, my test environment. So Contoso, Megan Bowen, all of that died a little bit ago, and I tried to renew it, and that got rejected because it had already gone. So I've been spending the past couple days in the evenings like rebuilding that whole thing. So I've got a new tenant set up. If anybody else likes to geek out with like home lab stuff, I've got Proxmox installed, and I had to tear down 6 VMs. I'm building 6 new VMs, and I was able to actually go to Windows 11 now. So all of our future demos will be with a better quality environment and with Windows 11. So that'll be exciting. But that's what I've been geeking out about. What about you?
That sounds really awesome. I'm going to be honest. I have the first Legend of Zelda game for the Switch, and I still
Yeah.
haven't played it. I haven't been able
You haven't
to.
even put it in and
I,
tried
I
it
have
yet?
I have not even got it loaded on the Switch yet. So I see the new one coming out, and I'm like, all right, I got to get through the first one first, Breath of the Wild, before I can dive into to that.
Yeah.
Well, my kids they're both under 5, and so like we do a lot of Mario Kart.
Hmm.
They really like that, so that's where we spend our gaming time right now.
Nice.
What have I been geeking out on? What have I been tinkering with? Well, a few things. So this week, OpenAI announced a iOS app for the US
Hmm.
for ChatGPT. So you have a
Yeah, I downloaded that
direct
yesterday.
app for GPT right there on the phone. It burns through battery. I think they've got a data leak in there they need to fix, but been exploring that. That's been really cool because they added a couple of features. You have the ability to go in and export some of the conversations, send it to like another note or another
Hmm.
knowledge app, which we'll talk more about today. So I've been exploring that, but also been exploring more of the Bing chat and their AI based chatbot, which is powered by
Hmm.
OpenAI. Microsoft just continues to dump new features into Bing Chat. You have the ability now to export to a PDF or to like a Word document, which is pretty awesome directly from the conversation. So they've added some new features there, which are really cool. Been really exploring in the web and in the mobile app the updated features there. I'm spending more and more of my
Hmm.
time with some of the OpenAI and the AI generated products. And then when I'm not chasing my kids, which has been a pretty big load, I'm not complaining. My back is, but when I'm not chasing the kids around, I've had a pretty heavy workload as it relates to all the change happening in the Microsoft world. So that's kind of spilling over into some of my fun time a little bit, just trying to keep track of some of that. But for the most part, just playing with some of that AI stuff, and hopefully getting ready to record some content on that here shortly.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I've been using Bing Chat over the past day to kind of look at TVs lately, and I've seen the demo about like asking it to compare things, and it actually has worked pretty well. I've been asking it like I'm looking for like something that's good for gaming, something that has good quality. I'm thinking about redoing like my office back here, this area, and it's been nice like rather than like searching and hunting the normal way and trying to find comparisons, like just spec comparisons, getting it kind of natural language back has been really nice. So that's awesome. And then with this kind of PKM stuff, we're definitely going to touch on AI today and talk about like some of the AI features that are available in them. I hope to expand more in my own personal PKM environment to do more with AI, just without having to jump out to another tool, you know.
Yeah,
So
totally agree there. My biggest struggle when it comes to the personal knowledge management stuff is I want to stick to the Microsoft stack as much as I can, just because of some
mhm,
of the interconnectedness of the system already, and I don't want
mhm,
to get into a pattern where I have a whole bunch of stuff from a third party floating around in my head, and then accidentally bring that into like a Microsoft conversation and you confuse somebody off of that. So I've been trying to
mhm.
stick with that as much as I can. But I'm looking forward to today's talk because we've been talking about this since like last fall as we've been kind of going through the various apps and doing a lot of our research and
Mhm.
trying to really understand all the limits of all of these features.
Yeah. So, yeah, to kind of kick it off, we've got an idea to talk about four main areas and then just kind of general. So we want to consider a few of these like knowledge management systems and how we deal with tasks and notes and capturing stuff in a few different phases. And the journey that I've taken, I started out with a little bit of this back in November of last year. So it's been what, 7 months now. I almost had not necessarily a breakdown, but like I just kind of like reached my wits end with there's too much information, there's too many things flying around, and I'm lost, right? And generally, my big problem overall has been a lot with task management, and I feel like especially in an enterprise, we have too many to-do lists, right? And personally, I don't know if I have ADHD or what, but if I have like more than two or three places that tell me what I need to be working on, I just get overwhelmed and I just don't start at all. And I kind of have like trouble starting to work on something if I don't clearly know what's next. And having to jump between like six different to-do lists is frustrating for me. So I've been on this journey to try to like get everything into a system so that I don't have to manage it quite as much and I don't have to go to all these places. But the four main categories we're talking about today when it comes to note taking, task management, and just getting things out of our brain so that we can free it up to do other things is capture. What's our process for like capturing information, taking notes, capturing tasks whenever something pops in our head and we got to get it into a system? What's the difference between like some of the more modern ways of doing things versus some of the more traditional, what the tools map to? Sharing and collaborating, that's a big part of especially note taking is we don't have meetings by ourselves. We have meetings together. And how do we capture, you know, collaboratively, how do we capture kind of like the brain trust of the group of people? And then the third one is organization and structure. How do we organize it in a way that we can get back to things or we can surface information without, having to dig too much for it? And there's also some rules, some like general lines of thought for that too. For, do we do folder based structure? Do we do like tagging? Do we do kind of a neural network type of structure in a graph? So we'll talk about that. And then finally, like extensibility. How do we, get things connected in different ways so that we don't have to like copy and paste everywhere. We don't have to have 8 different apps open to get it into that kind of single pane of glass. So I've been thinking about this for a few months, and Andy, I think you've been kind of doing this longer than me in finding like what works best for you, right?
Yeah, this is something it has two different applications for me. One is definitely the personal knowledge management side of things. One of the biggest things I've struggled with is there's so many different sources of information, and then consolidating that into almost a single workspace to be able to process it. The hard part is taking all those different sources and just funneling them down to be able to make it something that is consumable. And what you quickly run into is that
Mm-hmm.
one app does this thing for this one service and another app does this other thing for this other service, and you're switching back and forth between apps, and so that's causing friction and context switching, and that causes you to lose train of thought, and you lose time in the flow of productivity. So there was the
Mm-hmm.
personal knowledge management capture side of it I was really struggling with. And then the other side of it was like how we work with it as a group. Like in the workplace, we have 50 different places where we're going for information. Policies and procedures are over here in one of 10 different OneNote notebooks. There's 12
Mm-hmm.
different Microsoft Teams, and each one has 30 different channels, and which team and which channel has that announcement or that conversation around this like one thing. And so it was really just
And
trying to
each one of
figure
those
out,
has a notebook and a wiki. And
yes,
the wiki's going away now, and
and it
it's
just
just
keeps
it's hard
adding.
to manage all
Yeah.
of it.
And the struggle is like just getting to that piece of information that I need to be able to do like this one thing here in the future. So I went down a whole rabbit hole of productivity apps on YouTube. That's not for the faint of heart, because it can get pretty gnarly pretty quickly. There's definitely different camps that are advocates for different apps, and every week there's like, I'm switching to this and I'm switching to that, and I'm like, I don't want to switch to
Mm-hmm.
anything. Like I just want to figure out how to utilize what I have best now. And then occasionally like there might be a comparison. For example, like
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Loop enters the conversation, and that kind of takes things in a new direction. So I've went down the whole path of the PKM second brain. Uh, that's a whole study in and of itself. So just
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to apply some of this to some of the things that work for me. So yeah, I've spent a lot more
Yeah.
time in this, to the point where I've circled back around a couple of times, and I'm like, oh. And so
Yeah.
I think
It's
I
almost
approached
like a
you about this
hobby.
conversation back in the fall. I'm like, can we do a topic on this, so we can like just like narrow some of this down, and maybe other people would be
Yeah.
interested in it. So here we are.
Nice. So, uh, we're going to kind of, I think have what, 4 different apps that we're mainly going to look at, or platforms, if you will. The first is OneNote, Microsoft OneNote. That's kind of the old horse. Melanie Hohertz, whenever we posted this, she was like, "I'm OneNote ride or die." She's gonna be OneNote for life. And with OneNote, I would kind of bulk in just like the traditional Microsoft 365 system of doing things, right? That's OneNote plus To Do plus Planner, like that construct of like a group, right? And then we're going to look at kind of the emerging candidate or competition that almost feels like it might be cannibalizing some of OneNote's territory internally, and that's Loop. You'll notice that like on this, we're going to keep track of our thoughts in a Loop workspace today. So we're using Loop to separate everything out, kind of drive to that organization of our own thoughts and get it out of our own brains. But I almost feel like, I know it's integrated in the 365 system, but it feels like a new modern take on PKM. So we're going to consider that. And then a couple of contenders outside of the 365 suite are Notion. If you're familiar with the Notion product, that is what I have personally landed on. So we're going to go through a little bit of like what I'm doing with Notion, what I like about it, what makes sense to me. And I'm hoping that I can get recommendations from people about, oh, you're doing that in Notion, but you could do it the same way in 365 and kind of maybe get me back towards the Microsoft world. But I'm using Notion personally. And then the final one is Obsidian. And that's one that Andy, you have been using a lot recently. And it's more localized. It's kind of this modern way of doing things with components. And there's some features that you really like about it that we'll touch on as well. And it's just kind of different ways of doing things, with a different take on it. So I think it'll be really interesting to cover. So where should we start, do you think, with all of
So
this?
yeah, we'll go into our general category, and we'll start off with OneNote, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about Notion, Obsidian, and then we will loop back to Loop. And we're gonna do this very
Heyo.
specifically. It's because in the context of this conversation, Loop is the newest app to fall into to this category. It was announced,
Mm-hmm.
a year and a half ago. It's recently we did a deep dive with our friend Daryl, who's in the audience. Hey, Daryl,
Hey,
and
Daryl.
we did a deep dive on the Loop app, Loop workspaces and pages. So Loop's definitely the newest kid on the block for this, but I think it addresses some of the concerns that maybe users have about like OneNote and some of the features there. So we go
Mm-hmm.
OneNote, Notion, Obsidian, and then we're gonna bring it back to Loop as kind of a comparison.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned that, I want to also mention as we've gone through this exercise, um, I find that I circle back to OneNote in comparison to some of the other applications, partly because of it's in the Microsoft suite, but also some of the integration that's built into the Microsoft suite. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
compare some of that with the Loop features as well. And then it's hard to do a direct comparison with Notion and Obsidian because there's a third-party applications. So we're aware of that. We know there's going
Mm-hmm.
to be a little controversy there. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So starting off general, let's talk about storage for these
Mm-hmm.
applications. As far as
Yeah.
storage is concerned, with OneNote, you got your option. It can be local or it can be cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I think increasingly Microsoft is pushing us to cloud storage with OneNote, but you still have the option to create a
Mm-hmm.
notebook local, save it local if you need. With Loop, it's all cloud, so you're going to need
Yep.
cloud and internet in order to work with it.
Yeah. I'll put down MSA as well because it Loop is available for your Microsoft 365 account. That's what we're using here. But also you can use Loop with your personal Microsoft account if you're looking for personal productivity. So that's what MSA is. It's at the Microsoft account. Now Notion is also online only, but I don't know if it has like an offline mode. I know that Loop does not have an offline mode, right? There's not like a cache mode. I saw the question come through about that. Notion also is going to be online, but it's in their proprietary, service, right? It's not, you're not taking a Notion file and storing it on Google Drive or OneDrive or Dropbox. It's their own system with its own account. Now, Obsidian, that's local only, right?
There is an
Or
option to cloud
you
sync.
can do online if you're
Yeah,
premium or something.
yeah. The default is local, but there is an option to cloud sync, and it is a paid feature.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a paid feature. And it's not the idea of putting it on a cloud storage system, right? And it's like portable. It's like their own account system, their own storage, probably like AWS or something, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Daryl confirmed there's no offline mode for Loop as well. So that's storage. There's, is it local storage? Is it cloud storage? As well as we kind of accessed or talked about the offline capabilities. Now with Obsidian and with OneNote, that's where you can truly be offline. You can just make a OneNote file. You can make a Notion. What do they call it? It's not like a Notion database, but it's a Notion, construct, whatever they call that, and it's completely offline if you want it to be. Now mobile app capabilities, like or where it's available on apps, right? Availability. Let's talk about that a little bit, like how portable or how flexible are these different systems? With OneNote, right? You've got a Windows app, you've got a Mac app, you've got iOS and Android, and you've got web, right? And there's not really any other option there, is there? That pretty much covers it all, doesn't it?
I think so.
Okay. And with Loop, it is web first, right? It's primarily web. It is available on Mac and Windows as a progressive web app, right? There's no like install, right? So we'll put that down as PWA. And then there is a mobile app, at least for iOS. I've got the mobile app on my phone now. Do you know if it's available for Android? Does anybody know in the chat if Loop is available on Android yet? I know it's on iOS though. It might be test flight for iOS.
I will be completely honest. I have an Android blind spot because I'm an iOS
Yeah.
user.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what somebody says. Phil says yes for Android. Okay. So it's available on there. So it's pretty much everywhere as well. It's some people might say that the PWA is too lightweight. I personally like progressive web apps, so I definitely don't ding, them for that. Now Notion, it's available as native applications you actually download and install. It's available on the web. It's available on Windows, on Mac, and on iOS and Android. I'm going to put web first on this one because it's really kind of a web centric. Like you create an account, you go to Notion website and you start there, then you download the apps. Where with OneNote, it kind of started with the local side and then it's become a cloud solution just historically. Now, Obsidian, what are we looking at? It's mostly, it doesn't really have a web portal, does it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So it is definitely available for Windows, Mac. It's also available on your mobile devices, so you can get it for iOS and
Mm-hmm.
Android,
Yeah.
and you can use it
And
there. But
Linux.
in those cases, or Linux, but in those cases, like unless you sign into the Cloud Vault, you're going to be using a
Mm-hmm.
local vault inside of there.
Yeah. So there's that. Somebody correct us if we're wrong about the web portal. I know you can sign into your account on there, but I'll be curious if somebody knows about Obsidian more. So it's definitely on Windows, definitely on Mac. It's definitely iOS and Android. Um, and then web is questionable. We're not quite sure about that one because you've just been doing the local. You're not paying for Obsidian,
Yeah,
right?
I'm just using the local
Yeah.
capabilities of it.
Okay.
And
Cool.
there's a comment about another tool out there, Confluence, used by developers.
Uh-huh.
There were so many tools out there. It was hard to really par this down. John and I each kind of picked a third party app that we were really interested in. I've used Notion for a while as well. We actually do
Mm-hmm.
our show notes on that, but John is leading the charge kind of on the topic there for Notion. And I
Mm-hmm.
specifically picked Obsidian because there were a number of features that it provides that we'll go in more depth with
Mm-hmm.
that I don't see in other apps that are really valuable for some of the work and the things that I do. So we know there's a ton of apps out there, Moises, Craft, Confluence. There's so many note
Mm-hmm.
taking apps, Logsec. There's no way we would be able to do a single
Yeah.
show on
Evernote.
all of
I used
them
to use Evernote in college,
way back. Yep.
Yep. I've got a colleague that still uses Evernote and is all about it. And then, yeah, Confluence. Like, I kind of, I would view Confluence not really as a personal knowledge management system. Oh, I see. Daryl just put that in there. Like, I'm looking more at like personal productivity and not so much team productivity. I know that the lines are very blurred between them, especially with like Loop being more collaborative focused. But I'm thinking about my own life and trying to keep my own self sane. So that's just where I land on it. Is I don't think I would use Confluence for my own personal stuff. That might get into extensibility though with some of these other platforms. Um, that being said, we're talking about personal stuff, but a lot of us use these things for work, or people use these productivity things for work, and we want to talk about enterprise security and kind of like what is available in these tools that we know of, right? So with OneNote, obviously that's going to be within the M365 compliance boundary, right? So I would say like Microsoft compliant, right? If you're a Microsoft shop, it's within that realm. It's stored on your OneDrive. It's stored in your, in 365 groups, e-discovery, all of that. Now, there might be people watching this that aren't in the Microsoft world, so that's not necessarily a ding to the other ones, but it's more Microsoft centric. Same with Loop, right? It's Microsoft compliant for the components, right? But when it comes to the workspaces, that's still TBD, right? There's still things with e-discovery with this new like kind of light SharePoint that gets created. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. And I think Daryl will chime in with in the
Yeah.
comments. I'm going to volunteer him to
Yeah.
fill some of the gaps there. To your point, though, the compliance story is working toward full compliance, as Daryl says.
Yeah. Kind of it needs work to get there. It's heading that way. But if you're using it inside of Teams and you're doing Loop components, totally those are on your OneDrive. Those are, as normal. So maybe we'll hear, a better plan sometime soon about workspaces getting more enterprise ready. Now Notion, as far as its security, I did a little bit of searching around before this and found that while it's not Microsoft specific, like within e-discovery and all that type of stuff, there are some enterprise type features. So there is single sign-on, and it uses SAML. So you can set up if you've got like an authentication service and you want to do enterprise Notion, there is SAML capabilities, and that does work with Azure AD. So you can do an Azure connection, and people can log in with their Azure credentials into Notion. And then it has its own audit log. So it's a proprietary, it's within Notion's like admin area, as well as you can do MFA. So you could do multi-factor authentication and basically, force that for your team space is what they call it. Now, whenever we talk about Obsidian, what does it look like there, Andy?
So it is encrypted, and if you do work with the cloud component, it is US storage based.
Okay. So
So
US based storage for the cloud version,
yeah,
and that's premium.
as far as the application itself, because it's local based, it actually stores a series of markdown files in a folder structure on your local operating system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. So it uses the local, but if you're using cloud, it's encrypted, but if you're in the EU, you need to be aware of that. There's data residency concerns there that come to my mind for Obsidian. Okay. What else in the general category? Is there anything else before we kind of talk about capturing and like getting into like the process or workflow of some of these apps?
Those are all the topics that we had for general. There's pretty active discussion going on in the chat. That's really cool. I'm kind of following along with that. But those are the four main things that we wanted to bring up as far as general was concerned.
Okay, cool. So I should have. I wish I could like take this component and copy it, or like copy a duplicate of it. I think somebody put that in the chat. Like we need duplicate in here. So I will go ahead and just start a new table then and talk about capture.
Oh, hold on one second.
Yeah.
This is one we didn't really bring up, but cost. Cost for.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Let's put that down. Okay. So cost. There is, you can use OneNote for free because like you can do the whole free version, for personal. And then there's also M365 licensing, right? It's part of your E3, E5, whatever SKU that you have. Same with Loop, right? There's the free MSA version, right? And then there's also the M365 version. I think maybe what we should also put here is there's like personal and business O365, right?
Yeah.
Or personal family O365. You can do that with OneNote and all that because you've got OneDrive. When it comes to Notion, there's a free version. I'm using Notion for free. Then there also is a paid version, so there's premium as well, which I need to figure out like how much is that? If I go in here, upgrade. So there's the free plan for $0. There's a plus plan, which is $10 per month, business, enterprise, and then there's AI on top of that. So there's plus, business, and enterprise. Enterprise. And then there's also the AI add-on too. They cost money. So plus is $10 a month. Business was 18 and 25. And 25. And then their AI add-in, how much is that? The Notion AI, I want to say that's like $10. Yeah, $10 extra. And you do get a discount if you're buying one of these other tiers. But I'll just say $10 because I think it's like 8 if you have a discount. Now Obsidian, what is its structure?
So it's free for personal use,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a Catalyst option, which is $25. That's a one-time payment, and the Catalyst
Mm-hmm.
option gets you access to insider builds and some special privileges in the community and access to the dev
Okay.
channel. There's also a commercial version, $50 per user per year. And then they have a
Okay.
couple of add-on services as well. So if you decide that you want to do the sync, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
$8 a month, and they bill that annually. And then there's a publish option, which is cool. You can use it as an online kind of
Mm-hmm.
wiki, an online repository. That's going to be at $8 per month, billed annually.
Okay. Okay. So we'll do that's what, $8 you said? And
Mhm.
sync is $10?
The sync is $8,
Oh,
and
8.
the
Okay.
publish is $8. Yep.
Okay. And the commercial was what, $50 a month?
Yeah, 50 for the commercial, and then
Okay.
the insider builds are 25.
Okay. Interesting. So yeah, you're kind of building your own. I think for most personal people, probably what I would do is I probably would have the free version plus the sync if I wanted to have
Mhm.
like more flexibility there, just for like an individual person. Catalyst, you get so support. It's kind of you're basically supporting the developer with that one. So $25 one time is not bad for that if you really use it, and the value of that is probably way more than $25. So okay, cost. Thanks. Appreciate you guys remembering the cost portion. So getting into capture, let's add another table for that and talk about the difference in capturing stuff. So
Daryl says you can copy the content of the loop to a new page.
yeah, but then it copies the whole component, right? I don't want to like ruin it. I want to have a duplicate, right? So Daryl, tell me if I can duplicate so that I can do that faster. Loop with 3 O's. So as we get into capture, we want to talk about like the way that you add notes, the way that you add images, maybe files to it, things like that, as well as we fill out the rest of these features.
Yeah, so while you
So what's
finish
the
that up,
easiest one to start with? Probably text.
yeah, so formatting
Okay.
of text and content. So what kind of formatting does it support?
Mm-hmm.
Embeds, recording and ingest is kind of how we break it down.
Okay.
So
So the formatting with Word, it's really rich text, right? You're not doing, or with OneNote is rich text formatting. It's kind of, what normal people use, right? What about Markdown support? Because I know that's popular, especially, in the nerdier realms. Do you know anything about Markdown
yeah,
for
1 second, pulling up notes
OneNote?
on that.
Okay. So we want to talk a little bit about Markdown support. Loop, I'm not sure if Loop supports Markdown. I know that Motion or Notion is big with Markdown as well as Obsidian, right?
So Obsidian is Markdown based.
Yeah, the whole structure is using Markdown, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then of course you can do rich text for these ones as well. That's table stakes, right? It's just normal. Like if I want to do like highlight something, hit B to make it bold, hit, italics, I can do all that type of stuff.
Yeah, so you're going to have Markdown options, and then there are some keyboard shortcuts there as well.
For what are you talking about?
For Obsidian. So like if you drop text in, you can do the Markdown if you want to make it bold, or you can do a keyboard shortcut like a
Yeah, you use those
Control B.
Markdown. I haven't gotten super into Markdown, so I don't quite know how it works. I know that people who are like big keyboard junkies, they love that. Obviously, you can do rich text here. I think this is a good, maybe its own line is code block support, right? That was a good one from the chat. It's like, how does that work? Daryl says that there's basic Markdown support in Loop. So what I saw over here on the side is that I guess it doesn't support Markdown. OneNote doesn't, right?
Yeah, limited options with that. So on the topic of Markdown, one of the reasons that I leaned into Obsidian is because of the support of Markdown. And there's a couple of reasons for that. When I can do note capture with it, which is great, but getting that information out of Obsidian and into another system, Markdown is supported across a whole bunch of different platforms. So for example, I can draft a blog article directly inside of Obsidian, and it makes it easy for me to push that over to WordPress and publish right from there, because WordPress supports Markdown, and that was something that I thought was really
the
nice.
formatting doesn't get all messed up
Exactly.
in the translation. Yeah.
And because of the way that it's just a simple Markdown file, if I decide that I don't want to be in this app later, it makes it easy for me to move my content. Have you ever tried exporting content in bulk out of OneNote to another system? Not easy, not fun. So that was one of the things that really appealed to me, is that because it's basically Markdown based files, I have the flexibility to easily integrate with another system, but also if I decide to move that content later on, it's Markdown files. So that gives me,
you can do the work and port it without
Yeah.
having to do a bunch of fixing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point.
and think about this, like Notion has kind of their service and your content's in, and getting that information out of it, if Notion were to maybe get bought out by a competitor that I can't use, for enterprise work, or one that I just don't support, then like it would make it harder for me to kind of move on to my stuff. So that was one of the reasons that I was really interested in Obsidian, was the simplicity of the Markdown and the ability to be flexible in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So code block support. This is one that Darwin posted in the chat. I don't know a lot about code block support as well, but I believe Notion has that no problem. I think that's a component that you can add, isn't it? So if I do something here and do like code block, then yeah, so I could do a code snippet as a type, and I could support, look at all those different languages that it supports. So that's a resounding yes for Notion, right? What about support for code blocks in Obsidian, Loop, and OneNote? So if I do like a / here, I don't see a code option right here. But if I type some text here is some text. I'm wondering if I highlight and get the little, this is like the fly out to do formatting within Loop. I don't see the ability to have a code block in here. So it looks like loop is a no, probably, unless somebody else knows anything else. Yeah, Tim says Notion and code go hand in hand. It works really well. That's cool. I don't do a lot with code, but if you're writing blogs in Notion and you need to do like code chunks for like PowerShell or whatever, that's a good idea. I'm curious, is PowerShell? PowerShell is supported by that code block in Notion. What about Obsidian? Do we know anything about
Yes.
code blocks in Obsidian?
Yes.
Probably yes, right?
Yeah, it does support code blocks with a triple backtick.
What does that mean?
The triple
Is
back.
that
It's
is that
underneath
those?
the escape key in the upper left-hand corner.
Oh,
hit-
these. Okay, so
yeah.
you do like 3 of those, it makes a code block.
Yep, you do a triple
Okay.
backtick, and then you're able to enter in the code and end it with a triple backtick.
Yeah. Oh, here's Tim. He must be a
Yep, there we go.
developer. He's like maybe adding tick tick tick. That's funny. Yeah. Michelle says no code block yet in loop. What about OneNote? Does that support? I probably should have had OneNote open on my computer. All right. OneNote code blocks. So it looks like an add-in, right? An add-in for that. So maybe here's inserting code blocks from tech community. You can do this.
I'm not a developer,
Paste it into Visual
so,
Studio
yeah.
Code.
I feel like
code will be color coded, then copy with
not going to
format.
be out of the box with OneNote. I think you're going to have to use a plugin or
Yeah,
component.
yeah. I'm gonna say no, and I'm gonna say plugins ? So you're probably like just looking at that. Oh, Tim says also the triple backticks also work in Teams for code blocks. So that's cool. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I just don't do a lot with code these days. I can write PowerShell, and I went to school for software engineering, but I'm like 10 times slower than an actual developer at this point in my career. So code block support, I think that pretty much wraps that one up. Now, what do we've got here as far as like images, attachments, audio? You want to just do them in that order?
Yep, just go right down the list.
Images, attachments for like other file types and other like types of embeds, audio, video, kind of the basics, right? So obviously you could do an image in OneNote. I do that all the time. Take a screenshot, put it into a note. Obviously you can do an image in Loop with the /. So we're going to say yes on that. Yes on Notion, because I do that, of course. Anything special about this? Actually, you know what? Here's something special. On Notion, it's a 5 megabyte limit for the free version. So that's one thing that I've been considering the paid version of Notion, is because sometimes I want to add something to like a personal note that's more than 5 megabytes, and then it tells me it's too big. So you can do that, and if you run out of that, then you're like, okay, crap, do I need to put it on some kind of cloud storage and then paste a link to it instead or something? Obsidian, do you know if there's a limit on that size for free or anything?
I don't know if there's a limit on the size. It's a markdown file, essentially. So I don't think that there is.
Yeah, and it's just local hard drive space.
It definitely supports images.
Okay, so that's an easy one. Now, attachments. Do we want to like split it out between local attachments on the note and like cloud storage attachments? Because OneNote has an interesting thing where, say that like I can do local. If I drag like a PowerPoint slide deck in, I can keep it inside of that OneNote file, or I can do upload, so cloud attachments, right? Whenever I like add an actual file, it will offer to upload it to my OneDrive and then convert it to a link attachment. And I like that a lot about OneNote personally.
Mm-hmm.
With Loop, it's really you're really just doing a link, right? You're not attaching anything to the .fluid file itself. You're really just linking out to another location, right? Now with Notion, you can do that. You can do like, yes, you can add something, or you can also do like a cloud link, but it's like more pasted. You know, you go upload it somewhere else, then you paste in a link to it. Where this one is like a native upload. We want to call it that maybe for OneNote, is it offers to do it inside the tool. Now Obsidian, of course, because it's just a standard markdown format, you can attach a file to it. It goes into your Obsidian second brain, but then also it's probably the same as a cloud pasted file, right?
Yeah, so they're going to support options for attachments with copy and paste or drag and drop. And then you can download
Mm-hmm.
or you can copy it to a folder inside of the vault if you need. So that's one of the things about the way that they structure Obsidian is
Okay.
that it's vault based, which is basically the vault is the folder that all the markdown files live in. And so in the
Mm-hmm.
app, you can have multiple vaults. That's like switching between different notebooks inside of OneNote. So
Mm-hmm.
with that, in the vault, you can create a folder and you can drop your files in there and you can reference that across your notes as you need.
Mm-hmm. I will also say for Notion, I can do cloud with integrations because I can make a connection to OneDrive, Dropbox, or Google Drive, and then I could like browse and attach things that way. So I'll put that also in Notion as like that's an extra bonus. Now I haven't personally connected that. The only thing I have a connection to is a podcast app called Snipped, but that's that one. Okay, so audio files and video files. What do we have about that?
So this is just high level, whether these types of files are supported inside of the application itself. And I think this
Mm-hmm.
is one of the things that OneNote really has going for it is that you have the
Yeah.
ability to drop an audio file into
Mm-hmm.
a notebook page.
I think another thing with OneNote is that it has the recorder.
Hmm.
Like that was amazing. I used that all the time in college where I would like record the lecture while I was, typing the notes and everything. So that's a super powerful option there. I know a lot of the iPad apps I use for like handwritten notes, you can also record while you're taking notes and then it will play back what you were writing at what point or what was said when you wrote that word is pretty cool, but that's kind of outside of these four pillars. For Loop, you're really just doing cloud links, right? You're not doing like a attachment to the actual file, the Loop component. And it obviously doesn't have a recorder because it's not a local application. For Notion, it's really attachments or cloud, and then it also has. I'm gonna put cloud here too. It does not have a recorder though in Notion. That's something that I miss. Along with like handwritten, that should be another category here. It's handwriting. Obsidian, there's the ability to attach an MP3, right?
So you can
As
embed
well as cloud
or
links.
attach or embed an audio
Hmm.
file. There's not an out of the box way to capture audio with it. You would have to resort to like a community plugin to do that with
Yeah.
Obsidian.
Okay. Video is probably the same thing, right? Except there's an audio recorder here. So why don't we combine these two and say audio video, right? Just kind of do it that way.
Yeah.
It's like rich media, right? Handwriting in these apps. This is a sore point that I have for Notion is it does not. But there are plugins, right? So you can go the plugin route and do that. OneNote, this is kind of where it pulls ahead in the capture space is the native or the mobile applications are very good with ink. The Windows one is very good with ink. So we'll say inking, right? That's kind of the official word. There's nothing for Loop for like handwritten notes. I guess you could technically paste in a whiteboard, although it's the other way around. Never mind. You would do whiteboard, and then you'd put one Loop components in it. So it's like kind of reverse of what we're talking about. So we'll leave that as a no. What about Obsidian? Do you know if it has handwriting?
No,
at
no,
all?
no handwriting
Okay.
supporting out of the box.
Okay. Yeah. So there's that. Um, Another one I have here is optical character recognition, or OCR. And what this is, if those aren't familiar with it, is it's the idea that if you add a picture, you take a picture with your phone of like a receipt, and you put it in your notebook, can you search for the text that was inside of that picture? So what I know is that yes, OneNote has this because I've used it before. You can deep search into the content of images, like for text on a sign, something like that. That's not a thing that Loop does, to my knowledge. If you add an image, that it indexes it with OCR. Notion, I think you're also looking more at plugins for that because yeah, it's like adding support via, GitHub plugins, things like that. So it's not something that I've seen, but you can do plugins for it. What about Obsidian?
It's
Is
not
that
going to be
also a no?
supported out of the box. It's going to be third party.
Okay, so also plugins for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, before we move on from that one, I want to go back to the OneNote OCR for a minute. This has
Hmm.
actually been in OneNote for years, and it's actually been really good for a really long time. One of the things that I've really liked about it is if you capture a business card, it was
Hmm.
optimized to create a contact for like let's say I was in OneNote on my iPhone, and I
Hmm.
went to capture a business card. It would actually create a contact card that I could use on my iPhone in the address book and extract all that information out like right there. And then when you take a picture of an image, it's just a simple right click and it does OCR right there for the images right inside of the notebook. That's been
Hmm.
a really awesome feature in OneNote for a really long time.
Yeah, and in OneDrive in general, like I love that for like taking pictures of things that you need to do expense reports for later. Being able to search in
Whiteboards,
your OneDrive for stuff. Yeah.
PowerPoint presentations. I used it a lot for PowerPoint presentations and
Hmm.
conferences a few years ago.
Hilda says she uses it for business cards, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Rebecca says she would love inking in Loop. I want to highlight that. I would love that too, to be able to like, add a little inking section, write, draw a picture, especially in a meeting,
But what
something
if you
like
did that
that.
the other way around?
A little bit lighter than a whiteboard.
What if you did your inking in whiteboard and then you use loop components around it?
Yeah, and I think that's the design, you know. It's just, is that breaking me out of the Loop workspace, you know? That's when it starts to be like one of those kind of context switches
Yeah.
that we talk about, and like that friction to like, oh well, I'm on the Loop component. Where's the drawing I did? Oh, it's over in the other place, and you got to like reverse yourself. As Rebecca said, I want both.
Yep.
It should be two-way. Can we just have it all? So another couple things that I have in our show notes is the web clipper, um, drawing. I guess that's really like handwriting and inking, and then a free form canvas.
Let's pause for just a second before
Okay.
we continue down this feature list. We've
Yeah.
been painting a pretty picture and describing it, but we haven't actually been showing it to our audience. So I think this is a good point. Or we've been
Yeah.
showing Loop this entire time, and as you've been building some of this out, I think
Hmm.
let's take a minute or two and let's actually show the apps that we're talking about here. Just
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
summarize a little bit of this, and then we'll continue down the list. But I want to put some images to the context of the conversation that we're actually having right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's share your screen. Do you have a OneNote up? Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah, you got OneNote.
I've got OneNote up, and then I'll do OneNote in Obsidian, and
Okay.
we'll go back and forth with that. So I'm using OneNote on Windows 11. So this is the OneNote that was born of OneNote 2016. This is not the OneNote on Windows 10. Uh,
Hmm.
there's multiple versions of OneNote right now, and they're consolidating toward OneNote, which is what this is, and this is the new look and feel.
That's
Uh,
been kind of confusing for years.
yes, yeah,
This
that
transition is gotten dragged out longer than I think they intended.
Yeah, and what we're seeing now is it's starting to look more and more like OneNote on the web, where you have the ability, if you want to have your tab layout on, you can, if you want them vertical, you can do that. If you prefer them all on the top, you're going to be able to switch back and forth with that
Hmm.
and pick that layout. But if you want it to match up with like what OneNote on the web looks like, you can move your tab layout over to the left hand side of the screen, the vertical layout, if you will. And then they are also introducing the simplified ribbon there, where it not doesn't take up as much space inside of the notebook. So I just want to point that out. I'm using OneNote on Windows 11. This is on the early release cadence, so you might see some features there that they put inside of those specific channels. But that's what we've got
Hmm.
here. So, just briefly, heading back to some of the formatting things and some of the capture stuff that we're talking about, just
Hmm.
working with it right away in the user interface, and you might find that some of the other apps don't support this, is the ability to have your formatting tools right along the top as you're working. Working with different fonts, font sizes, bold italics and underlines, things like
Hmm.
your alignment, and even styles. It's all right there. So they bring that up front inside of the app. So you don't have to remember keyboard shortcuts. You don't have to remember the markdown that goes along with that, which makes this much more approachable for all the end users out there that are potentially getting started with it. So the barrier to get started here is going to be much lower. And as far as like just going down the list of the things like inserting, you've got the ability to go in right away, tables, spaces. We talked about things like file attachments. So we can select an attachment from the local operating system, drop that right in to the notebook.
Hmm.
Let me just grab a file real quick. So you can make it as an attachment so that you can download it and work with it, or you can insert it as a printout. That's going to be supported in there. There's the printout option that's separate if you want that. You can insert spreadsheets, an existing spreadsheet, or you can go ahead and create a new one. You've got other insert options, like, for example, dropping in pictures. You can take advantage of the camera that's built into the system with no plugins. And I think that's something that some of the other apps that you have to be aware of. You might have to install a plugin for like an Obsidian in order to capture from the camera, versus this is built into the app and it's going to use the local system. In this case, my MacBook, or if I'm on like my iPhone or my iPad, it's going to use that built-in camera.
Hmm.
Um, so with the insert, just kind of, I'm blasting through a couple of things here just for the sake of time, but like images and attachments. We mentioned just a little while ago working with the ability to capture audio. So let me switch back to the classic ribbon here, expand that a little bit. So with audio, two things I want to point out here: dictate and then transcribe. One of the things that we're seeing more across the Microsoft platform that I'm a big fan of is the ability to dictate to the app. I can't tell you how many things I've started drafting while walking my dog, just holding, using my iPhone and my AirPods, and just talking to the app to get things out of my head, to get over that blank page, to get things started, and then come back later and actually clean it up. So dictate's actually built right in, captures the audio, and you can go right away. And then you can go ahead, record audio, but you can also transcribe that audio, convert that speech to text, and then you're going to be able to format it. So I like that feature as well. So if you record the audio, you get the audio file, but if you transcribe it, you take that audio and convert it to text, and then it's much more flexible in like what you're going to want to do with that later on. We mentioned video. One of the things that I like about the OneNote is, let me see if this will actually do it live in the demo here. Um, Yep, there we go. So I just copy and pasted that share link from YouTube, and it went ahead and grabbed and
Hmm. As
embedded
a
that video
playable video.
right
Yep.
inside of the notebook. Like, that's a little thing, but I think that's just really, really cool. And that's something I teach in like OneNote classes for teammates
Hmm.
that are interested in that. So that's just one of the ways that you can manage video there that I wanted to point out. Um, we talked about the OCR. Let me see if I actually have an image we can try to capture with, see if I can get anything out of this one. Copy text from picture. All right, so there's a bunch of text in this picture. These are all the different types of note takers. This is actually a really cool talk from a YouTube video. I really liked it. It talks about all the different apps. This is why we're not doing a comparison of all the apps, because look at
There's
how
so
many
many
there
things.
are.
Yeah.
But just go in, copy text from picture, and then I'll just go over here, and there we go. Like,
Yeah, OCR is kind of a superpower.
yeah,
You know, like that's the big feature. It's one of those
yeah,
things that kind of shows the maturity of OneNote. You
yeah.
know,
And to your point, the maturity of it, like this is something that's been around for 20 years. And like, I think we kind of overlook some of the power that's actually built into it, because there's like, oh, this new app on the block, you got to check this thing out. It does this one thing that's absolutely amazing. And, you know, it's hard to kind of like realize that we've got some pretty awesome stuff built into this. So I just wanted to like put a visual to the OneNote side of it and point out some of the things that we were talking about. Do you want to do kind of briefly through Notion?
Yeah, I'll show some Notion stuff. So I've got a Notion page up here, and I can do a lot of the similar stuff, right? So I can do like a file, like Andy was showing, where I can upload a file. I can hit choose, and then I can grab like this picture right here, and I can upload that way. You see how it's uploading it to that cloud service? It was like 700 kilobytes, right? Now, another way that I typically capture things is I do it with screenshots. So if I want to take a screenshot of this and take a note on it, then I'll take a screenshot, and then that's already in my clipboard. I paste it. Now I get an embedded image right there. And something that I use in Notion is I will either add a comment on that image, or I'll add a caption, and I'll add a caption like, okay, what was I thinking when I took this? Like, note that this icon is crooked or something like that, right? Like, imagine that we're, doing some design work or something, and I'm like, the spacing here and here is not right. I would like take that as a note about that picture. The other thing I could do is I could add a comment, of like, here's what I was thinking at this point in time. And then that adds a comment off to the side, basically, for me to have on that particular image. Like you were showing, Andy, you can also paste in things as embeds or as links. So if I grab like one of my videos off of YouTube and then go down here into the page that I was in for Notion, let's get rid of all of this stuff. Start with an empty page and just paste it in. It asks me, well, do I want to make a bookmark? Do I want to have the link to it? Or do I want to embed it, natively in the page? If I hit embed, same thing as what you were showing with OneNote. I can actually play it. It's more of I don't know, it's more of like a standard embed, because like I can click the link here that's going to jump out to my browser to play it. Or I've got the actual like YouTube play button, where OneNote, it was like a white button. It was a little bit more, kind of shielded, I guess. And then again, with this, I can add a comment on it. I can add captions to it, kind of take notes under the video if I wanted to. Or I could also, just go down, add another like whole component basically in Notion. So there's a little bit of difference there. Now, one thing that we touched on a little bit was the formatting stuff and how it works with Markdown and also rich text. One thing that here is some text. I probably, if I learned Markdown and I learned the keyboard shortcuts, I could be faster about things, but I can like do the standard, like I can bold something. I can make this italics. I can make this one underlined. But where I get a little bit like, there's a little bit of like walled gardenness of it, is when I get into like the formatting to try to make things stand out a little bit. I have this standard colors and backgrounds, right? So if I want to highlight something and make it like a yellow background, I can do that. But as you can see, that's kind of like, it's like a pastel size, type of thing. And to break out of their standard kind of muted colors, you have to go add a plugin that gets you to like full CSS formatting. And then you're kind of getting nerdy and you're getting like more brightness. But some of that for my eyes are a little bit hard to see, honestly. I like how clean this is, but also, it's hard to get like high contrast sometimes. And then there's, I can change this to a header or a numbered list or something like that. Those standard kind of, rich text formatting that you're used to being able to do is what I like about Notion. But I feel like I'm going around and I'm kind of clicking into these menus to do things where probably there's a keyboard shortcut, but I just haven't learned them yet. And I've been using it since November. So that's a little bit of like what Notion looks like for whenever I'm formatting text and I'm kind of adding text around. Some of the structure can feel a little bit constraining at times compared to something like OneNote, where it's like a free form canvas. And it's a little bit that way in Loop as well, in my opinion. It's more of a linear type of canvas rather than just wherever you want, you can slap some text that you can do in OneNote. So you can scroll as far as you want. With this, it's linear in Loop. With Notion, it's columns. You're adding new columns to a page, and it's kind of like a grid layout. So just a little bit difference. Some people like one way versus the other. Yeah, Tim, I know like I can, if I'm starting out with text, then I can do like an H2 and I can start typing. It's just some of these, like whenever I type, just slap some text down to get it to change. It's like buried under this one, where with Microsoft's little pop-up formatter, there's a little bit more options, I guess. Maybe I'm just more used to seeing like the word toolbar that's kind of floating, and this feels like it's a little bit like one level deeper. So not a bad or a good thing. It's just different for me. But yeah, I do the slash commands to slap some component in all the time. So that's what I wanted to show about like how I work with images, how I work with text, and how I work with attachments and things like that. So when it comes to that freeform canvas, I would say yes on OneNote. It's more linear on Notion or on Loop. For Notion, I would say like you want to say like a grid layout is kind of the way to explain it, because you can go down as long as you want to, but you can also add columns and you can go wide if you need to, but it's not fully, it's all kind of lined up like a grid. What about Obsidian? Is there a free form canvas when it comes to Obsidian?
Well, let's bring it to the forefront. So this is Obsidian, for those of you that are seeing it for the very first time. It is a
Yeah, I've
single
never used
column.
this at all.
Yeah, it's a single column based layout. So it definitely flows top to bottom. We have the ability to focus in on the canvas itself, but much like you were just describing with that like linear based layout, everything kind of flows within there. But they did introduce a feature. It's a core component is now, and it's called a canvas. And this is a freeform canvas, and you can move it all around, and you can put things left and right and top and bottom, and you can create connections, and you can bring in content from other places within your notebook. But the freeform canvas gives us that page-like feel while referencing notes that maybe you've captured. It's almost like a mixture of notes and whiteboard, which is really cool. But you can bring that in. So the main note-taking portion of it is definitely going to be a single column layout there. And then just briefly while I'm here, I'll go ahead and knock out, for those that haven't seen it, some of the formatting options, things like the inserting of images and so forth. So it does support things like your basic formatting, bold, italics, and underlines. It does support numbered lists and ordered lists. It does support some additional formatting options. It's actually really cool. They use an Obsidian-like structure to define that for their articles, and you can actually bring that into your notebook along the side, so you can make quick reference to it whenever you're actually working inside of the notebook. But their knowledge base is actually based off of Obsidian, which is really cool. And so they have
they're using their own tool.
Yep.
which
Yeah.
is good to see.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. But yeah, they just have some of the examples of like Markdown. So if you're not familiar with it, if you want to do a heading, it's going to be single pound sign. You want to do heading 2, it's going to be a double pound sign, and that's going to give you the different styles. For the headings, if you want to work with bold, you're just going to put asterisks in front and behind the text. If you want to do italics, it's a single asterisk before and afterward. You want to do strike through, you're going to be doing tildes with that. So there's some things that you have to learn, because you're not going to get that inline, UI based element. You're not going to get the forward slash like you're going to get in Loop or in Notion. So there's some things that you kind of have to learn. It gets a little hardcore.
Yeah.
Working with this, but with that being said, it makes it so that if I want to write a blog post and have that in my Notion, or sorry, in my Obsidian notebook, and then quickly publish it over to WordPress, it's pretty straightforward to do that. So, but if you haven't seen it, this is Obsidian. I'm able to go across multiple pages along the top, which is really cool. I really like that. So it makes it easy for me to kind of reference one thing and go work on something else. I have the ability to open the panels along the side. And we're going to talk more about this in just a little bit. This is my overall vault here. So I have my main vault open. Within the vault, you have sections. And we'll talk about the organization in a little bit, but I have sections, and then there's content underneath that. And I can easily use this as a way to navigate through my notes in my notebook to get to what I need. But I can also collapse it down and just concentrate on the thing that I need, or bounce over here and do this thing, and like kind of keep my place as I'm moving along, which I really like the way that they kind of did that in the user interface.
Yeah. I want to point out something. Dwayne mentioned that YouTube embed that we were talking about is available on Loop. So yeah, I'm showing that here, Dwayne. So I changed the audio video. Instead of like cloud links, we're going to call that cloud embed, because it's cloud embed on the others too. Is like you can play the video inside the thing. So I think that was really good. The other, to keep moving along, is browser web clipper. So we're talking about capturing. A big thing of PKM or Second Brain is when you see something, can you get it into the system easily, right? And a lot of times for me, I'm browsing content on the web, or I'm discovering things on the web. So a web clipper to me is critical. That's something that I've seen, obviously OneNote and Notion has very well, is that you can use a browser plugin to capture something in OneNote or in Notion, and you can choose where it gets sent. So those are easily a yes. Because you're kind of in a service when you're talking about Loop workspaces, there's not a web clipper or a browser plugin for Loop as far as using it to ingest information. So if that's fair, I would think I'm going to mark that down as a no, right, Andy? Like there's not really browser integration for Loop. What about Obsidian?
So there's not a default clipper. There's a third party web clipper that's available.
So it's a plugin for that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, since we're talking about clippers, can I sing the praises of the OneNote web clipper? I use the absolute mess out of the OneNote web clipper. That is like one of my favorite features of OneNote. I've captured so much information with that, and it has saved me so many times because of how convenient it is. It's just built right for the web browser. You can choose a section, you can drag and drop if you want. You can choose just the content that's in the page and get rid of all the other fluff that's on the page. It does it really well, intelligently. You can also just highlight a block of text and right click and send that. But in addition to doing that, let me bring my screen up. I just want to show this one.
Yeah.
All right. So here I am. I'm going to go, let's say I want to collect some information here about working with the clear collect function in Power Apps for some documentation that I'm working on. Well, with the web clipper built in right there, get signed in. So you want the whole page? There it is. Whole thing. There's your region if you want. You can also just do the article. That's the one that I use most often. Grab the article. You can also just do the bookmark. Now, in addition, you can go in if you want, grab the text that's important, and then you have the option to clip that selection to OneNote and capture it. So that being said, I can pick the notebook that this is going to go to, the notebook that I want to drop this into, and then clip it. But what I really like about that is how it handles all of that basically in the background for me. And then when I head over to my notebook, I'm going to be able to go in. Let me go to this notebook. There it is. It's already here. It's going to load that for me. But when it loads it, it also creates a bookmark to where I clipped it from, like the reference to the thing that I clipped it from. So I don't have to go and grab that URL separately. It's clipped it. It tells me exactly where it's coming from, drops that into the article, and then it gives me the article. And if there were things like tables and pictures and stuff, it's got all that in it as well. I'm a huge fan of that. I use this so much. So
that is pretty nice
all day long.
Now, the way I use web clipping is I don't really use the Notion one all that much. I'm going to show what it looks like, but I have both installed and I'll talk about what I actually use. So the Notion web clipper is there. You can give it a title and then you can say where it's going to go. So you kind of select your area or like if it's going to link into a database. That's basically what it is. Now, there's a lot of other add-ons to like print something to PDF or like to do custom stuff with Notion. There's like save chat GPT output to a Notion. That's another type of clipping and sending somewhere else. Now, what I do personally is I use an app called Readwise Reader. That's my clipping plugin that I use. So if I'm on a page that I want to read later, like let's go to like New York Times, right? And we'll just like click on a random article. So say that I'm reading this article and, well, I don't really want to do that one. If I could find like a free one here, then let me just find like an
just go to ESPN.
Here's Vox.com or whatever. So say that I'm reading this and I want to like snag it. Then what I can do is I can grab it to Readwise Read Later. And dang it, it's not connected. I'm on like a clean install here. What is nice about it, let me just go ahead and sign in so everybody can see my things. All right, so if I do this and reload it, it saves it to Readwise, which then ports it over to Notion in a database that I'll show you. But what's cool is I can highlight it as I'm reading. So I can read it later on in that like standalone dedicated app, or I can grab certain things and I've highlighted that and I can add a note about it. Or I can grab this little section right here and I can add a tag. So this is about ChatGPT or Notion or something like that. So I can tag and take notes as I go. I can also take a note on the whole file if I want. So I'm kind of processing the document as I'm reading it in the browser, and then it all saves over to Notion ultimately. So if I go back over to my own Notion and I go to Readwise, then here in a little bit, it should sync, and then it will pop in these other, areas or these other notes that I took. So this is my personal notebook. So like I was listening to an article or a podcast, I snipped it and then I took like tags and notes and all that stuff about it. And it ultimately lands in my Notion because that's my second brain. So that's how I'm kind of clipping things and ingesting them into the system as I go kind of beyond the ability to have just like a web clipper. Is I'm kind of like processing it or I'm queuing it up for actually doing something with the data before I move on from it. So that's showing a little bit of my workflow and how I like process information.
Well, as the person that introduced you to the Readwise Reader, I will sing the praises of that app as well, because it takes.
I should have like done a referral through you.
Level. Like it is ridiculous how awesome Readwise Reader actually is, and like it also works with Obsidian and Notion and. There's a number of other apps that it works with as well. But not only are you capturing and web clipping, but doing annotations and notes and tagging in the flow of that thing. I can't tell you how much I use that. I use that so much. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And this is where like it's getting to more like modern stuff and where some of these like consumer tools are so good. Tim is asking, does Readwise give you a reader mode? I've been using Pocket for that. Oh
Yes.
yeah, it does. Oh yeah.
It'll replace Pocket. It'll replace Instapaper.
Yeah.
It'll replace your bookmarking apps. Like, it is literally one app for ingest. Like Feedly,
Yeah.
it consolidates them all. We might do a separate deep dive on just Readwise Reader. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
It's awesome. I pay $100 a year for it, but like here's that what it looks like from Reader. And I do this on my iPad. I'll clip things all day long for later on, and then at night I sit and read. And it costs $100 a year, but it is so fantastic. So here's that article. And while I was going through, I was adding like tags to it. I was highlighting things, and there's that reading mode, right? And I can change the way it looks. I can format it differently if I want dark mode or if I want something else. Two things that are great about it is one, you can also listen to this. So I don't think I can do it on the browser version, but on the iPad and iPhone, like I have trouble reading, honestly. I have like reading comprehension issues because like my brain is like programmed now to do like read things that are Twitter length. So I have poor comprehension. So what I'll do is I'll invoke the reader that will read to me as I'm reading the words and I retain it better. So you can have it read out loud to you and you can basically turn your articles into podcasts that way. The other thing is there's something that you can do called invoke the ghost reader. And this is getting into AI. So I can go ahead and I can say, I don't want to read this article. Go ahead and summarize it for me. And now what it's doing on the side is it's running a generative AI prompt to give me a like one paragraph or something summary that instead of 11 minutes, I can read this with GPT and have a summary. Or I can invoke Ghost Reader and I can ask it a question or give me some flashcards, stuff like that. So that's what I use Reader for. I love it. It's really cool. Then I can archive it when it goes away. But here's all the stuff I need to read over this weekend. You just see I've got like a queue. It's like my DVR of stuff to digest. So yeah, invoke the Ghost Reader, as Rebecca says. That's what it's called. It's cool though. I really like it. So anything to add on that, Andy, or you think we should move on to like sharing?
Can I
And
share my referral link?
Do what? Yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat.
Referral link, because
Yeah,
if
because
anybody,
Tim, if you want to check that out, if you actually use Andy's referral link, I think you get a second month for free. It like doubles your trial or something. So yeah, but I mean, I don't care about referrals or anything like that, but I'll say that I'm paying for it and I like it. So, yeah, so slap that referral link in there because I wish I had used it because I only had a 1 month trial and I think it doubles it for you. So while he's doing that, I'm going to do sharing and collab, and we'll talk about that kind of category. So we're going to add OneNote and then Loop, and then I don't know. Does anybody else have trouble typing Loop? I add too many O's. Notion. And you guys kind of see me struggling as well to like type in these columns. Sometimes it wants to like replace the text. Sometimes it wants to like stick the text in the beginning. I'm having trouble with that. Like, come on, Loop, just type the way I want you to type. Rebecca says yes, probably to the fact that you also type Loop with too many O's. That's a problem for me. So yeah, Hilda, we got the hookup for you with all these digital tools. That's why this has been fun. We've been talking about it for months, like building my own PKM on my own second brain. I've been like drawing diagrams of like, all right, I got podcasts and articles people send me and all this crap that's flying around. How do I get it into a second brain and then action off of it? And like the architect in me has been like drawing diagrams of how to flow all this stuff. So.
And that's how I discovered Reader. It was the same thing, trying to consolidate all of the different channels down to like a single source and not have to switch back and forth between a whole bunch of apps. And then doing the PKM research, I came across the Readwise app, and I was like, this is so close. And they're like, oh yeah, by the
Mhm.
way, we got this thing called Reader. It's pretty awesome. And that's my ingest tool now to get stuff
Yeah.
in my books.
Yeah. So that's my ingest for written stuff. My ingest for spoken stuff and podcast is I use an app called Snipped. That's an iOS and Android app. And that all my podcasting goes through that. As I'm listening, I can triple click my earbud and it will take a snippet of that. So I've got all of these little clippings from this particular article, and then I can go through and it uses again GPT to give me takeaways and transcribe the what was said. Then I can go through and I can take notes on it. So like this is just a great way to like save things from from podcasts as well. And it's all about just getting it out of like my sensing, reading or hearing, getting it into something on paper so I can do something with it. And then making it searchable with tags and all that type of stuff. So that's how I do my ingest. Sharing and collaboration, to shift gears a little bit. What do we have about that, Andy?
1 second.
So the exportability, right, is one thing. Like sharing level is another thing that we have a note on, and then co-authoring. So chat, let us know if there's anything else that's kind of along the lines of sharing in your mind or in your use cases. But this is what I've got in my mind. So we'll just kind of run through these. All right, so exportability or getting the thing out. Now, what I've done with Notion is if I want to share something, I'm not paying for the I'm not paying for the premium licensing, right? Where I would like add somebody to a team space and collab and all that type of stuff. So what I do is if I'm taking notes and I want to share that with somebody else, what I can do is I can export it as a file. And that's typically how I would do this is I can do it two ways. I can either export right here as PDF, Markdown, or HTML. Usually I'll save it as a PDF and then I'll email it to somebody. Or what I've done in the past is I've gone here to share and then I've saved that as a link. It like generates a public link with, no real like authentication or anything like that. Then I'll share that and it's like my live notes. So that's the way I typically kind of get things out. So you can do a file export, which is Markdown, CSV, HTML, or PDF, or you can do link sharing as well for your export. For OneNote, you can do the same thing, right? You can do PDF export, and you can do a link to the notebook, right? But not individually. It's really the only levels the notebook, right?
Yeah.
And then for Loop, whenever you're exporting something out, there's no file export. You're not like printing out to a file whenever it comes to Loop. You're really doing the sharing here where it's either a component, a workspace, or a page link. So again, you're doing link sharing, but at all levels when it comes to Loop. What about Obsidian? When you're doing sync, you probably can link, right? Because it's cloud service.
Yeah, so you can sync the vault. Oh, so it's at the vault level. It doesn't go down to the page level, but because it's a simple Markdown file, it's easy to export that if you want to drop it in a Word document and send that. So there's an extra layer to it.
Okay. Yeah, so just at the vault level, and that would be like a link to the vault if you're doing sync, right?
Yep.
Premium sync. And then your export, it already is a Markdown file, right? So you could do the Markdown export. Can you like export as PDF and all that type of stuff if you want just this one page?
Yeah, there's no built-in like export button. It's
okay. It's really going to your file structure and getting it out. It's a very kind of Unix-y way of doing it, I think. So that's one issue that I've had with OneNote for years is that you can only share the notebook. I can't share just a section. I can't share just a page. It's the whole dang thing, and it's like, uh-oh, I had a bunch of stuff I didn't want to share in there. And I really wish OneNote had more granular sharing capabilities. So like a manager has a notebook called one-on-ones, and they could share the page with their direct report without accidentally sharing everybody's one-on-ones with that person. Like, what the crap?
Well, also one of the
I
things,
struggle with that a lot.
yeah, one of the things to also mention about the sharing, and I think I've seen this echoed throughout the comments and in the chat, is the syncing issues with OneNote. When you start sharing OneNote
They're
notebooks,
slow to sync. Yeah.
they've gotten
So like,
better. It's gotten better, but when you get into a situation with like 40 people trying to access like the same notebook, there's going to be
yeah,
sync issues.
I constantly have sync issues with OneNote. So like, I'm going to say, yes, you can co-author, but it's finicky and it's laggy and all that. One thing we've noticed with Notion is, yes, and it's fast. Whenever we build our show notes in Notion, and it's so fast, it just works really well. Same with Loop. Whenever we were doing the demo with Daryl a couple months ago, I noticed that like it was so live and so fast, like typing in real time. It's as faster than Word and PowerPoint and Excel. The M365 co-authoring has set an expectation, and I feel like OneNote kind of doesn't really live up to that quality expectation when it comes to co-authoring. That's my own opinion on it. So, hot take. What about Obsidian? Is there really the concept of co-authoring, or are
So
you really
you
sharing the
can
vault?
you're sharing the vault, and so it's going to allow people to access files within the vault, but I don't believe it allows them to work at the same time.
Okay, so like not real time, right? It's they're getting a local copy. They're working with it. You're working with it. It uploads and syncs back and forth, but it's more of like a scheduled sync. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, it's going to be like a saved sync. Last
Okay.
one to save.
Okay. Yeah, but dude, yeah, Loop is fast. And like he's in this cell and I can edit it while he's in it. So it's not like Excel where sometimes you get like locked out, right? Because like their cursor was in the way, so that cell is locked. You don't have to worry about that with Loop. I don't know if it's using the Project Nucleus stuff that Jeff Teepers talked about or what, but it is a good co-authoring experience in Loop. Same with Notion. It just works. So, anything else on sharing and collab that you
Uh,
guys can think of?
we're going to kind of run into a little bit of that in the next section a little bit.
Okay. Cool. All right. So organization and structure, kind of the building blocks of what we're talking about. And this is where I got to be careful not to geek out too hard, because this is where we're talking about databases. And I love that. That is the thing about OneNote or about Notion that I love the most, is the idea of databases, and organizing it just makes very good sense to my brain. So, see what I'm doing here? I double clicked on this and I go to type, and it adds it to the front sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. Like, okay, Loop product team, if you're ever watching this, like if I double click on text, I expect to type and it replaces it like that. It did it there, but it didn't do it on the other one. See, okay, I've double clicked on it. I'm going to type, it replaced it. Double click again. Okay, so now it's working the way I expected, but it didn't on the first one. That's got to be a bug. All right, so databases is the first thing, that data construct. And with Loop and Notion or OneNote, those are no's, right? Like they just yes for this one, no for Loop and OneNote. Now, this one I feel is like especially kind of a bummer in Loop, because Loop, if it feels Notion-y, so people I think are expecting, like, if I make this table right here, why can't I have a database? Why can't I have a connected table that is referential and things like that? What about Obsidian? Do you know about that one? And then we can demo it.
No,
There's no databases in
no.
Obsidian. Okay, so this is kind of the real one of the differentiators of Notion, right? So with Notion, see how I've got these articles or these podcasts that I've listened to. This is not a folder or a list of notes. What it is it's a proper database with metadata, attributes, things like that. So it's got tagging, and that's a field in the database. It's got a link, which is a link type of field in the database. It's for, it expects a certain format. This is a date formatted one. So when I open these up, they're associated with each other because they're in the same database. And then the page itself is down here at the bottom. That's the content, but all the attributes are right here, and it helps me with searching, formatting, finding things. So that's the real power of that. And I'll go back to my demo workspace. Here's like my fake notes is, say I've got one-on-ones with colleagues, say I've got, an idea for a Stream Deck plugin. All of this is a database of notes, right? So it's a collection, a way to associate these so that now I can use the attendees and I can find everything that was a meeting with Adele from Contoso. There's that one.
If I may, let's
Hmm.
bring this into the Microsoft people. This is a
Yeah.
SharePoint list.
Yeah,
This
this
is
is
a
just like
Microsoft
SharePoint list,
list.
but like so much lighter weight, just kind of easy to deal with, you know?
I
Um,
I think it's very similar to what Microsoft has done with the list tool over the last couple of years. Like
yeah.
the way that I would describe a database is it's a Microsoft list with lookup columns so that you can connect one list to another. It's easy to create because you can create it on the
Hmm.
page versus having to create it and then add it to the page like we have to do in SharePoint. We have to create the list first and then go and add it to a page afterward. Here, you
Yeah.
can create it on the page at the time of page creation with other stuff.
Hmm.
So if Microsoft engineering is listening, it would be really awesome if I could create a SharePoint page and create a list at the same time. Create the list on the page instead of having to create the list and then come back to the page. It
Hmm.
would just
There's
save
a
me.
little bit less friction to that
Yeah.
experience. So,
And if the
Tim, yeah,
Microsoft
go ahead.
people are listening, can we get this in the other apps? Can we get the ability to work with
Yeah.
Microsoft Lists inside of OneNote and Loop? That would be awesome.
Yeah, at least in Loop. So Tim has a good point. He says, "Hey, there's something like that in Loop." And yes, we have done that during our demo with Daryl, where you can change this column type and you can have it be like a person or a label. The
Mhm.
label's very powerful. So you can have like a group of labels. The problem is this row right here, Tim, is not its own object. So it's not its own thing, its own loop page. And that's where it would be a database rather than just like a row in a table. And that's where I'm kind of getting to like, this is a little bit more portable because it's the whole page. I can share it independently of the database, publish it. I can do all that stuff. I can add comments on it. It's its own object inside of the construct of the database. And also, with this database, you add a new item or a new object in the database. With this, because they're pages, you can make templates, right? So I've got one set for meeting notes because this is my notes database. So every time I have a new meeting, I can click new and it's going to create this thing with the topics, the key takeaways, the action items, all those notes. So as I'm typing my notes in the meeting, I can do all that. I did not mean to invoke AI. I can do all that stuff, and then I can also like jump up to the top and be like, "Oh, this is a really important point." I can do a key takeaway, or somebody says, "Oh, I'll take this as an action item." I can take it down in that section. So I have a template basically. This is really basic as far as templates. There's people who sell templates that are way better than what I've done, but that is, I think that kind of covers the idea of databases in Notion for me. So it it's not in OneNote, but the fact that it's not in Loop kind of hurts, to be honest. So anything to add on that you could think of?
I would just like to see some of this come to OneNote and Loop.
Yeah,
Let me use my Microsoft list in other places.
yeah. So this is what we had in our notes was these other columns if we want to, or these other rows. So page templates, obviously, yes, in Notion. In OneNote, you can have it, but isn't it Windows only? I don't think you can have a page template on Mac. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right.
And you can't do it on web as well. Loop, there are page templates. So like if I add a new page right here,
pre-built.
they're pre-built. Yeah. And there's other templates if you guys haven't looked at other templates. So they're not custom yet, which is, would be nice in the future. So we'll say back over here, we'll say, yes, pre-built, hopefully we can get to custom. This is like fully open, with Notion, you can add anything, save it as a template. Now, what about Obsidian? Can you have page templates?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, hold on.
I just don't know anything about Obsidian.
I don't use the templates feature, so that's not something that I have
Ultimate
on the
goal guide to templates. So what are templates? You can say timer reduce for your second brain.
Yeah. Let's just put that as a question mark. We'll come back to that one.
Yeah. Oh, it says you can have like, standardized headings and stuff like that. So you're creating a folder, you're turning on the templates feature, and then as you create like a new note, it gives you those things pre punched in. So I'm gonna say yeah, you
Okay.
can do that because like, oh, I'm gonna write a blog post. I have a template for blog posts, and it gives me what I should fill out. So I think I'm gonna count that as a yes.
All right, I'll drive on this one.
Yeah, page linking and backlinking, I get a little bit lost on.
Yeah.
But you're a big nerd about that.
All right.
You go nuts.
Let's go here. Sorry. We are in Obsidian, and this is one of the things that I really love about Obsidian. So there's a couple of different link types that you might want to work with. There are backlinks, there's reference links, there's wiki links. There's also the ability to create table of contents, embedded links, and then maybe even previews. We've seen the embed, like we can embed, and point to other things. And depending on what we're embedding, in like OneNote, it might do like a preview of what of the video from YouTube, for instance. That is also supported in Loop and Notion. So embed links just kind of gives you that visual context. In OneNote, you can do an embed link for an Office online file. So if you've got a cloud file, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, you can embed that into your OneNote notebook, and you can actually have the Excel file in the notebook. You can have the PowerPoint in the notebook and move through the slides or the Word document, which is really, really powerful. So we've seen some of the embed stuff, but the things that I really want, and I feel like this is limited in OneNote and some of the other apps, is I want the table of contents. That one for me is like really big. So like I have a notebook and I have a whole bunch of stuff going on. Now, in the way that they structure, it's like this is, a section, or this is like a page, and these are sub pages underneath it. But I don't have a true like table of contents, which like allows me not only to point out the other pages, but maybe link to a specific paragraph, or maybe link to a sub item related to these things.
Like deep linking.
Yeah.
More than just like the pages itself.
Right. So like in the OneNote world, you can get a link to the section, you can get a link to the page, and then you can even get a link to the paragraph. But you have to manually collect those things and then go and do something with it. And that's a lot of effort. So like, granted, I could go in and say like, well, grab these things right here, and then, let me just copy those and then go and add a page, and, we'll call it like table of contents. And then like I can paste those in. But what if I add another thing to this? It doesn't update. So there's no other, I have to go back and manually like update it. And like, let's say there was something here that I was interested in and I wanted that to show up in the table of contents. I got to go back and grab this, You'll find the table of contents, go in, and I've got to manually update that. And again, every time I want to do this, I have to do something with it. If I'm
Mhm.
using this as a knowledge base, that table of contents is really, really handy. So I don't have that built in out of the box. So in the OneNote world, there's a plugin from a Microsoft MVP. It's called One More. Um, Plugin's really awesome. It's free, and it has things built into it, like the ability to go and create a table of contents. There's a table of contents reference that you can add to it. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's a
Mhm.
plugin, and so you're dependent on the developer to keep it up. And he's done a really
Yeah.
amazing job with it for the time that I've actually used it. It's been really, really cool. So that's one thing that I would really like to have. Um, so with that, looking at my Obsidian vault, the way that things are structured over there is kind of similar. So like I have like this would be like a page, and these would be like the sub pages underneath it. This would
Mhm.
be another page, and the sub pages underneath it. But there are other link types that Obsidian brings in that provides like context of like overview context, kind of like where you are. And then there's some more powerful links that are like defaults built in. And somebody's asking about the OneNote plugin. It's called One More, and the O and the M are capitalized. One More.
Okay. All one word.
Yeah.
Okay, I put that in the chat.
Thanks. All right. So, what are the other link types that are really cool? All right. So backlinks. All right. This is references one thing to another. So like when you do like a backlink, it's basically saying that this thing is referenced or linked from like somewhere else. Obsidian does that by default. In the upper right hand corner, if this page is being linked from something, it's going to tell me a backlink in the upper right hand corner. So it's going to show me the backlinks for the page that I'm on. So if I go through different pages, so there's a backlink for this one. Click on it, and it takes me to the place where it's
Mhm.
actually referencing that. So like I inserted here just a wiki link, just a couple of squared brackets, and link to the page, and that's linking to here. Well, it's telling me where that's coming from. It's telling me that this was used on the about links page. And I know I should have named it links. Everything's links here, but this is the topic. So the about links page has this article that I'm looking at linked to it. That provides context on the thing that I'm talking about. I don't get that in OneNote unless I do it manually. So in the OneNote world, I would have to go in and say, okay, this is like my table of contents, and go over here, and like I would have to manually enter in a link to that thing,
Mhm.
um, and then I would be able to like follow it. So I have to do that manually. But in the Obsidian world, it automatically creates backlinks for me. So it tells
It's
me
referential
what
and
else is
updated.
this thing, so that I
Mhm.
can see the relationship between stuff. I think that's like in a knowledge based scenario super important. Like what else is referencing this thing here that I'm talking about. So that's one of the link
Mhm.
types, backlinks. And it automatically does that, and it's actually built in. And the other link type is a reference link. And this just points to a specific source or resource. So this could be internal to the notebook, or it could be external. So like with some of these, and I just had ChatGPT throw together a quick description, so I'd have some content on the page. So don't
Mhm.
take that
It's the
um,
truth.
as the truth. But reference links just allow you to link to and from. Well, they have this thing, so like in the if you had reference, or if you had links built into the document, it would actually like show those like along the side. So let me go in and like paste one in and say I want to link to the like about section. It'll add that in, and then should refresh and show like an outgoing link related to that. So it kind of keeps track of that. But it has the ability to do the reference linking as well, link to like that external source. And some of the other apps have that built in. But one of the things that One More plugin does that's actually really cool is when you go into the references section, you have the ability to create a bi-directional link. So you can say, I want to link this thing
Mm.
to that thing, and I want to have it go in both places. So like I would start the bi-directional link here, and I should have put some text on top of that. This is the start of the link. All right, so I'm going to reference that. And then we're going to say, okay, start the bidirectional link. All right, so that's going to be the beginning of it. And then I would go to the place that I want to reference it. And this is the end of the link. And then I would go and reference that. And so I finished it. So I click on this, it takes me back to the beginning. I click on this, and it takes me back to the end. It's creating bidirectional links. That's just a really cool feature that One More plugin offers, but like you don't get that out like by default. And so like it's saving you some of the manual effort of copying and pasting like links between the pages. Like it's just a simple drop down, highlight this text, hit the start, go to the other thing, and then complete it. And it just saves a whole lot of time. So getting into some of the different link types, I'm going to go ahead and show the other thing that I think makes Obsidian really, really amazing. So I've created these links between these pages, and I'm building this knowledge base. Obsidian has something called the graph view, and it gives me this nice graph that shows me how things are interconnected inside of my notebook. So now I actually know how my knowledge base is being formed from the bird's eye view. So like I can hover over here and see, okay, this link right here is referencing 3 separate things. So this is the about links page. It's referencing the reference links, the backlinks, and the wiki links all in that one particular area. So I can see concentration bubbles inside of my knowledge base. And I think that's just like critical for understanding how things connect, especially if you're building a knowledge base to what concepts are interconnected for this one thing that I'm doing. From the training and education piece, trying to remember all the SharePoint pages that are associated with one another, the corresponding documents that are being embedded on those pages, the corresponding images and the corresponding videos, and remembering to update it in all those different places is a full-time job in and of itself. This can streamline that. Now I can say these are the core assets that I'm using across all of these different things. And the graph view actually gives me the features to be able to do that. And that's one of the things that sold me on working with Obsidian, is the ability to have this graph view based off of all the backlinks and reference links and interconnectedness of my note taking. And you can
that's a cool feature.
It's so much fun to play with.
Yeah. That's really cool for being able to like drill in on things.
Yeah. And just to see how things are connected, because like you took a note on this one thing, that note in these other services just kind of exist. And like,
as you tag things similarly, but you see like how big a project or a topic gets. You can almost see it grow over time and then see it collapse as something else grows big in your life, you know?
I mean,
is there a time to this where you can say like, show me how the graph has changed over the past year? So you can kind of see like how your priorities have changed or something.
So there are filters built into it, and you can filter down based off of certain files, tags, attachments, and existing files. I don't know of anything date related.
Yeah, that would be interesting though, to see like how your interests have changed, you know, like, oh, you were really on this subject. Like, you know, there was a little bit about AI and there was a lot about metaverse. And then it's like, you didn't really do so much, but AI exploded in January. You know, it'd be really interesting to kind of see the trends.
Yep.
Like that. That'd be cool.
If I could ask our colleagues at Microsoft, I would love to see something graph related like this for SharePoint or SharePoint pages.
Like this is what your knowledge architecture looks like. Yeah. It's a visualization of your knowledge architecture.
If you want me to use SharePoint in the intranet capacity as a knowledge-based capacity, giving something like this so that I can understand how things relate to one another would be just amazing. But
you could set goals or KPIs for yourself based off of that. Like, I want to have, you know, I have a goal to have less things that are not connected to anything else.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And it's all built off of the various link types that are supported that you might not get in some of the other applications. So like the backlink tool, for instance.
Yeah. So to steal the screen and move it forward a little bit, there also is all kinds of different linking in Notion as well. It's the same thing as Obsidian, where you do 2 double like square brackets, and then you can link to something else. So like I can pop a link in for my meeting notes. When I go there, it jumps to the meeting notes section right there. And again, like Andy showed, it knows that there's something linking to it, and I can get back to that. Oh, it came from the dashboard. The other thing you mentioned was table of contents. I can do that as well. There's a table of contents for this page. So under my quick links, this is my home dashboard for my second brain. I've got these links that drop down, right? And they like cut down to this place, or they jump to an anchor position. I didn't create that manually. What I did was I did a table of contents, and it just knows based off of the headers that that's the sections of that page. So same type of deal as what you're talking about, although there's not a graph view. So I've kind of filled this out a little bit while you were going through yours. Is all of these, of course, you can just paste links to other pages, right? You can generate a link to this page in Loop and share page link. You could paste it on another page. That's page linking. Now, when it comes to backlinking, as Andy mentioned, you got to use a third-party plugin like OneMore for that. There's no plugins at all for Loop, so there's no way to get that whole backlinking possibility. And then it's native to Notion and Obsidian. When it comes to that graph view that Andy showed, that's available by native in Obsidian. It's a third-party application in Notion. I looked at it a little bit and it looks pretty complicated. I think you have to register an application to use like the API through GitHub and stuff. Loop, there's just no graph view. And then also with OneNote, we did find in our research that there's a third-party plugin. I don't know, does OneMore do it, or was it a totally separate thing?
I think it was a completely separate one.
Okay. Yeah, to get that graph view in OneNote, apparently you can do it with a third-party plugin. So that's the organization and structure side of things. Then the extensibility, when we get into how these things connect. You've heard us talking a lot about there's plugins for this, plugins for that. I haven't gotten into a lot of plugins personally, but I know that they're out there. So just as like a quick brush on things, when it comes to Notion and Obsidian, they are actively developing their own first-party plugins. So there's a Google Drive plugin, a OneNote or a OneDrive integration, stuff like that. Those are made by Notion, supported by Notion. And then there's also a community of third-party developers using the APIs to build plugins, and they either sell them or they're free on GitHub or whatever. With Loop, there's not really a plugin story right now for Loop. That would be an interesting thing to see maybe at like a build conference or something like that. I have no idea if they're going to announce any kind of extensibility in Loop, but that would be a really cool thing, is if they kind of embrace developers the same way that like Notion has, and hey, we're going to open up Loop to be third party developed. But right now there's no plugins. I don't know of any kind of thing coming for that. Maybe Daryl knows. Then for OneNote, there are third-party plugins. As you talked about, there's OneMore. There's other ones that a lot of them are paid, I think, aren't they? Where you you buy a license and then you add it to your OneNote. And a lot of times also you got to be careful. Is it Windows only? Is it Windows and Mac? Is it just for like the OneNote for Office 365? Is it OneNote for Windows? You got to be careful about which version it works for. So that's something to see there. Yeah, Phil says, yeah, build is next week too. So like maybe there'll be something with Power Automate. I would love to see connectors for Loop with Power Automate. That would be cool. So stay tuned for build. I've got a couple things on my calendar, but I'm not developer focused as much, so I'll attend like the keynote, maybe a couple others. So anything to add on those plugins, Andy, that you can think of before we talk about just the Microsoft synergy that there is?
No, I think you covered the plugins pretty sufficiently. OneMore is free, but a lot of the other OneNote plugins are paid. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So when it comes to the integrations, we're talking about Outlook, Teams, OneDrive, all the different places within 365. You can do some Notion connectivity with Microsoft 365. So you can add OneDrive, right? There's a OneDrive integration. Also, there's a Power Automate connector that is premium that I found. So you could do a premium connector and use Power Automate for that. Power Automate's 2 words, sorry. But like this whole thing is kind of iffy because of conditional access. So like I found that these things exist, but I can't personally test them because my organization uses obviously conditional access. So, you're probably not going to get very far if you're like using Notion for your thing and you want to integrate into work. You're really kind of keeping these separate. You're in a personal world at that point. So, there are integrations, but you're going to probably have to like work through your infosec group and good luck. When it comes to Loop and OneNote, that's where they shine, obviously, in the Microsoft suite. So, yeah, Andy's typing these out. Like, there's obviously, whenever you're talking about OneNote, or Outlook, there's the ability to email, as well as like what I think is amazing if I was a PC user, is in the OneNote or Outlook calendar, you can take meeting notes and it opens up a new note in OneNote, and then it knows who the attendees are, what the title was, what the description of it was, the join link, all that. So that's very powerful in that like you kind of do your tasks and you do your like meetings and your calendar management in Outlook that cleanly integrates over to OneNote to take those meeting notes. That's pretty powerful. With me, with Notion, if I want to take notes in that platform, I would have to go to Notion, click to make a new note, and then I'd have to put in the meeting details. So that's pretty powerful as well. And then Excel, PowerPoint, because of that maturity and that life that it's had, it's gotten integrated where there's OneNote buttons in all of these applications, as well as like in To Do. If you make a task, it syncs to To Do. So I think you know a little bit more about that, Andy, don't you? Like syncing a task to To Do
I mean,
from
just
OneNote.
yeah, I've had to do a really deep dive on this
That's a
lately.
problem I used to have before it had integration. I used OneNote for meeting notes and I make check boxes for like action items to
Yeah.
remember later. Then I forget because I close the note and I never look at it again. That's a problem, you
Yeah,
know?
the integration here is like it's super deep and it's super rich. So like you were just mentioning like the meeting notes feature, you can go into your Outlook calendar and just say send meeting notes to OneNote, and not only does it give the meeting notes, but it
Hmm.
gives you all the participants of that meeting, and then you can take additional notes on top of that, and it's just like one click to be able to integrate that, which is absolutely amazing. uh,
Hmm.
the task feature. So you can create the task list inside of your OneNote notebook, and then you can send that to Outlook, and it would sync with the Outlook task. And I believe it does sync with a to do list
Hmm.
now. So it would make it easy. Like, let's say I'm in that meeting and I'm using the meeting notes and create a series of actionable items that I want to follow up on, and then just hit the sync to Outlook, and then there it is. And like that
Hmm.
integration is there. Uh, One feature, email, send, if you're on Outlook in the desktop, you can send multiple messages to a OneNote notebook in bulk, including all of the attachments. So like if you need to pull something out of your inbox, maybe you have a retention policy and you have an essential communication with like an external entity that you really need long term. There was basically one click integration from Outlook to OneNote to be able to capture that. And then some of the other things like we just had here, one I want to point out is PowerPoint linked notes. If you've never used this, this gives you the ability in your notebook to reference slides in a PowerPoint presentation, and you don't have to leave the notebook. So you could have like
Hmm.
your notebook with your draft and your summary of all the things you want to build related to a presentation. And if you have the presentation going, you can do the link notes feature, and in the notebook, you get a preview of the thing, and you don't have to leave the notebook in order to see that. It's really awesome, and like most people have no idea that it's even there. Um, so that's one of the big reasons. Like it's really hard for me to move away from OneNote because of all the integration across
Hmm.
the other things. And that, I mean, it's in Teams. It's Teams meeting notes. It has
Hmm.
a integration there. It's inside of channels. as far as the replacement for the wiki in channels. So it's integrated there. When you create a Microsoft 365 group, you get a OneNote notebook to go along with that. So the
Yeah.
integration is just, it's deeply rooted.
Yeah. So that's the thing I struggle with too, is like OneNote is just so integral to the M365 process that it's like it's hard to not use it, in some ways. So with Obsidian, I just marked that down as no. In my own Googling around trying to find it, the only thing I found is like, hey, is there any integrations? And they're basically saying, well, you can like add OneDrive links to files manually, specific, you know. So I don't know of any integrations. I don't think there's really actual integrations for Obsidian.
Not directly
You
with the
know,
Microsoft suite. They
yeah.
they do have their core plugins which allow integration. So for example, there is a
So it's
core
kind of like
plugin.
two levels removed through like a third party plugin
Yeah.
that it
So
integrates. Yeah.
there's a Readwise plugin to take your Readwise
Hmm.
database and have that as part of your
Yeah. Same
Obsidian
with
vault.
Snipped for
Yeah.
podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
no native Office integration with Obsidian.
Hmm. Okay. So to kind of bring it home, we're like 12 minutes past 2 hours. It's been a long one. Um, I don't know that we've like clearly arrived at like one is better than the others, to be honest, which is like, I guess, a disappointment to people who've been watching for 2 hours. But hopefully we gave you guys a lot to think about and maybe exposed you to some different things. Like if you're a big Notion user, we talked about a lot of the power of OneNote, and if you're a big OneNote user, you saw some of the things that you're missing out in Notion, because like databases and stuff like that. Um, I personally feel I'm trying to be modern in my PKM, and right now for me that winner is Notion, um, which is a little bit biased because I've been using it for like 7 months. But what I see in Loop, I feel like long term, I'm kind of hoping that my journey goes from using Notion now to going to Loop. Personally, I feel like if I went from Notion back to OneNote, I probably would be taking a step back, I guess, into, I don't want to say antiquated, but I'd be going a little bit more traditional, right? I see myself maybe going from Notion to Loop as it matures because I feel like it's about the same, or it's a similar style of note taking, and not just notes, but management of content and everything. It just, I worry that it's a couple years out even from having those integrations, because like I rely on Readwise, and I don't want that to be clipped off in a separate app that is critical to me. But like because I'm using Loop or because I'm using OneNote, I can't like have it in one place. So for me, I think it's a very personal thing. But for me, I think I still land on Notion for my notes, my tasks, and my just kind of indexing of information. What do you think, Andy? You feel like you're a little bit less sold on things because you've played with Obsidian. You still do quite a bit in OneNote. What's your take on it?
So for my day job, I still have to live in OneNote. OneNote's the core for a lot of my capture, and then a core
Hmm.
for a
And
lot of
working with other people.
my personal
Yeah.
processes, and then team-based processes. As much as I've wanted to kind of change that story a little bit, the maturity of some of the other things are just not quite there yet. So
Hmm.
um, I there's a lot that I really like about Obsidian for personal knowledge management. The thing about that that's super attractive to me is the graph and then the linking system that's built into it.
Hmm.
I think those are really great, and the ability to like quickly get something over into um a WordPress. So like for personal knowledge management, like Obsidian's a really good tool for that. But
Hmm.
longer term, if there's a couple of things that come to Loop, that whole story is going to change. As the Loop components continue to grow, the OneNote team has been advertising for over a year now that
Hmm.
Loop components are coming to OneNote. that could potentially change the way that that I work, because then I could do some of the work that I do
Yeah,
from a
fingers crossed. When
workspace
is it coming?
in the fall, year TBD. But I could use like a Loop workspace for some of my stuff, and then upload a policy or procedure into a OneNote notebook that my team's using, or another team is actually using. So Loop components in OneNote. Another place I would like to see Loop components is in SharePoint pages. If I could drop Loop components into SharePoint pages and extend that story there, then Loop would be the thing that I would probably use more often than not moving forward. I had this conversation with Daryl, Modern Work mentor. Check out his YouTube channel; it's pretty awesome. But we've had some deep conversations about Loop, and he's been on the forefront of a lot of the research on this. But the thing that makes sense to me now that workspaces are in Loop is that I can create a workspace that each page represents a process, a policy, a procedure. And then I can use the components to push that message out into a Word document, where the colleague needs it, a whiteboard, and hopefully in the future, a SharePoint page, so that when the UI changes and I have to go and update that thing, I can push it out from the workspace
Yeah,
to all the different places.
it would be live and portable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from like documenting procedures, steps, and processes, that would give me central management of those assets, those resources, and the ability to push those out everywhere that they need to be referenced, and it's always up to date. Versus today, I have to go page by page in a SharePoint knowledge base and update things manually, page by page. I can use metadata to create columns to, hey, there's a review date on this, or hey, this is the topic that it pertains to, but there's no interconnectedness like I get with the graph view. There's no backlinking unless I do all of that stuff manually. And then remembering that this picture in this document library, and this video in this document library, and these office documents in this document library are used in all of these SharePoint pages. That's a manual effort across the board. So if the Loop components continue to grow and integrate into the other parts of the system, Loop will be what I use moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So you ready to land this thing?
After the biggest monologue ever.
Yeah. No, I think we're both kind of giving political answers, like what, like, try to consider every side. I will say though, like Hilda, she said she's switching jobs and still kind of doesn't really know where she's going to go, because this is an opportunity to change, right? When you're changing jobs, like reassess how you do your own like personal productivity. I think maybe the last thing to leave everybody with is some further resources to go learn about these things. If you're looking for OneNote content, there's lots of MVPs out there that have specific OneNote content that you can look at. I'll give one of my favorites. One of my friends, Nate Chamberlain, he's out of Kansas City as well. He has classes that he's taught about OneNote. He does sessions at conferences about OneNote. So search for Nate Chamberlain and you'll find some OneNote content. Andy, do you have anybody that you've seen that does like specific OneNote? I know you said you've taught classes on OneNote. I think Rebecca Jackson has done some OneNote stuff as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say Rebecca's in the comments.
In the chat, yeah. Sharon Weaver has done OneNote content before. So there, Shortcut Sherry is another one that I know that like they've done things on OneNote. So in the MVP community, especially, you're going to find OneNote help. Rebecca says a little bit. She's done some OneNote stuff. So search up Rebecca, connect with her as well. Thanks for being in the chat, Rebecca. For Loop, definitely like my go-to for Loop stuff, Daryl Webster, a Modern Work mentor. Definitely check him out. There's also a lot of other, YouTubers out there they've talked and touched on Loop. Daryl's a guy who stays with Loop and will keep talking about it over time more than just like single brushes. Anybody that you want to recommend for Loop?
No, Daryl
you can think of. Okay.
Our friend of the show, and the one that I'm waiting to for anything Loop related.
For Notion, if you want to learn more, look at Thomas Frank is one on YouTube, crazy, popular YouTuber. Ali Abdal is another guy. He's like a former doctor who like now does productivity talk. There's like dozens of Notion kind of centric people. So definitely look at those on there. Oh, Phil said also join if you're on LinkedIn, join the LinkedIn group for Loop. There's a user group that Daryl runs, and I think Phil also is an owner of it. So join that group to find like-minded people about Loop. Obsidian, I have no idea who to look for
I gotcha.
Obsidian. Some nerds in caves.
No.
That's
You
how
want
I
to go?
feel.
You want to go? Nicole Vanderhoven. I put her. For those of you joining in live, I put her YouTube channel up. She's
Okay,
an amazing resource for Obsidian, community ambassador. So her
cool.
stuff's really, really good. So I put that in the chat window. But Nicole
Okay,
Vanderhoven.
awesome. Cool. So that gives you guys some places to go look for other things. If we didn't give you an answer, I don't feel like we did because I don't think there's a clear winner.
This is an
I think it's
exploration.
personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was exploratory. I think it solidified my liking of Notion personally, but yeah, here we are. It'll be fun to maybe revisit in the future and maybe be a little bit more streamlined. So, um, Tim, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Darwin. Everybody who's been like continually chatting. Hilda, all of you guys. This was a long one, but it was a lot of fun to just discuss about. And the chat really makes a big difference with that. So,
It's also fun to research and try out some new
yeah,
apps and see what's out there. And
yeah. I've gotten like 6 months of being. I feel like Charlie Day in It's Always Sunny, where he's got like all the lines. I feel like I got that off of my chest. Like this is my crazy world that I've like dove into. I've gotten it out there, and maybe now I can move on with my life. So
until
this
the
was fun
next
though.
app comes out.
Yeah, we'll see. We're just one Microsoft announcement away from just ruining all of what we just talked about. So, all right, everybody. Well, thanks so much. I hope you have a good weekend, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next month.
See you in the next one.
All right, bye, guys.